Hello, welcome, welcome. Appreciate everybody coming out for Bible study tonight. We will get started with some prayer requests. So does anybody have any spoken prayer requests? This is going to take some getting used to because the boat's kind of rocking to this side tonight. Normally it's the opposite. So it's going to take a minute for me to fill that out. Anybody have any spoken prayer requests?
I have a customer. She came in DTC today. She has had her great nephew
Mm-hmm.
through Human Services for 10 months, and they have come in and removed that child because she told Olivia that because she didn't have a playroom for the child, and her dog was vicious. She's got a little old mud of a dog.
Yeah.
And I told Olivia, I said, well, in my opinion, they're probably going against her age, and they can't discriminate.
Yeah, maybe.
But Olivia said she was in tears.
Oh, bless her heart.
Her name's Deborah.
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 We'll remember Deborah, yeah.
Charity Thomason. She used to drive the church bus at the Church of God.
Hmm?
She was in my class. Her boyfriend passed away. 24 years old, had a heart attack.
My goodness.
So remember that family.
Yes, absolutely. If you didn't hear that, it was a 24-year-old had a heart attack and died.
He's an immigrant.
Goodness. Man. I remember them. Anybody else have?
Gloria Webb, that's Connie Parsley and Donna Cripps, Donna Hendricks's mom.
Okay.
Gloria has cancer in various places. She was going to try to do treatment, and she's so very sick and just throwing up and just weak
Yeah.
that she's decided to just go with hospice and not take treatment. So please remember her care team and her family. She is just a great lady, but she is very sick.
Goodness, yes. Remember that whole family. Absolutely. Mm. Good grief. Man. Yes, definitely. Lift them up too. A lot of heavy needs, yeah. Anybody else have a spoken request? No. Danny's dad, yeah. Yeah, please remember them. They've been requesting prayer this week, and Danny said he's had some good times where he could laugh with them just a little bit, which has been a blessing, but he's in a really bad shape. So, yeah, remember him and their family. And I'm hoping I'll hear something more about my work by the end of the day Friday. And then I do have one other, at least part-time job opportunity that I should be able to start middle of next week if neither of those pan out. But appreciate your prayers, and just I want to land where I'm supposed to. And remember Olivia, she's still, fighting kidney stones, and pray the Lord will bless her and help her, and she can get them all passed in short time. All right. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer, and we'll get started tonight. Hey, Lara. No, it's closed. Yeah. Oh. 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 Goodness. Absolutely. Yes, we'll remember them. Absolutely. Well, let's lift up this need and all those that were spoken and all those unspoken tonight too. Dear Lord, we're thankful to be in your house on another Wednesday night, and Lord, thankful that we can come together as brothers and sisters and share our needs and our concerns and our successes and our victories as well, God. And we bring them all to you, for you're our portion. You're everything, Lord. You're the one that gets us through our days. You're the one who can come through, God. You're the one who called us out of the miry clay, Lord, and we give you thanks and praise. And if you can save sinners like us, Lord, all these other needs, they're easy for you. So we bring them to you and pray for your best for each person. Pray that you would use each circumstance, Lord. I pray to shine your light on this dark world. Pray that we'll be faithful and obedient in all ways, God. And even tonight, Lord, as we get into this Bible study, Lord, I pray for freedom in this place, that each person can share and we can ask questions and we can just have a time together with you, Lord, to break your bread of life so that we can grow and we can mature and we can get closer together as a people, and we pray closer to you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we got tonight's lesson by request. We're going to talk about greed. And I tooled this one way and basically wadded it up and threw it away, and we're going about it another way. Long and short of it is you guys need to talk a little. But I had this written out that it was going to be more like a lecture, and I don't know about y'all, but I don't love people just sit up and lecture and just talk the whole time. I like interaction and hearing questions and other comments, and so I kind of redid it a bit. And so I want to open up with a couple, I'll open up with Luke chapter 12, verse 15. I'm going to read all my verses from the NLT tonight. They were just a little easier to read. I like the way it worded some things, so if it doesn't match yours perfect, that's probably why. But Luke 12, verse 15 says, "Then he said, 'Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own.'" And I want to ask, when you think of greed, what comes to mind? Money, yeah. What's that? Selfishness, yeah. Anybody else have anything that just pops in your head? Stuff, yeah. I grew up on a Mickey's Christmas Carol, and I don't know if that's y'all's favorite Christmas Carol, but it happens to be one of mine. I literally see, Ebenezer counting his change like he does in that movie. He's like 1, 2, but he's got more than he could ever spend. He won't even burn an extra log on his own fire. He'll stay cold at home just because he doesn't want to spend any money, even though he's got just this wealth of money. So that's the image when I think of greedy people, oddly enough, is the Disney, Christmas Carol with Scrooge just counting his money and not doing anything with it, and there's plenty of that's out there. And I'll say this is not a term that I've necessarily heard, it's just what popped in my head. When I say Christian greed, what do you think about? Or greed within the church? So what occurs to me a lot when it comes to sin in general is there are the black and white sins, or the things that just people in general, no matter where they're from, just agree on. You shouldn't be shooting up heroin on a street corner. You shouldn't kill somebody. You shouldn't steal from people. Very simple things that kids understand too, that we know when you're saved, you start coming to church, you shouldn't do those things anymore. But there's a lot of other sins, and there's a lot of other wrongs, and there's a lot of other things like that once you get inside the church, they kind of become church sins. They're things that, for whatever reasons, can get swept under the rug, can continue to go on or whatever because they feel, I want to say holier sins, but that's an oxymoron. That's not really true. But they're white collar sins. You know what I mean? It's like things that I didn't kill anybody. It's like, well, you might have killed their character, or any number of other things, but those things get accepted while other things get acted like they're, awful. But when I think of greed inside the church, are there any examples or thoughts that come to mind that once somebody's in the church, how greed can take hold? Power. That's a big one, yeah.
I started, it's a lot like what I started saying. It's like positions,
Yeah.
not always positions, but
Gives you some notoriety.
be jealous of another person.
Absolutely. Yep. I would say even, we did our study on, spiritual gifts. Even they can become a source of, not that we can just, I'll take one of those and I'll take one of those, but as God moves in our life, we can sit and count them like Scrooge does and act like we're spiritually superior to somebody else because they've never prophesied or they don't preach and they don't teach or whatever it might be. So I can think of things like that. I've met too many people that practically wear badges on their shirt like a military person. This is who bishop, apostle, healer, blah, 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 whatever it might be. If you've not been around me very much, that kind of stuff kind of grinds my gears a bit, when people just act like, not saying it's always wrong, it could just be a thing for me, but that stuff eats at me, and so it can be things like that. Are there any other types of greed that come to mind? Pretty good list. I mean, I'm not looking for any. It's not a trick question. So let's read some scriptures, particularly about greed, beyond Luke 12:15. And I think as simple as Luke 12:15 is, man, it solves a lot of problems if it really took root in our lives to understand. And when I read that, I also think, churches can be greedy with people or money, or stuff. I've watched at times over the years, and I'll say over my many years, so hopefully nothing comes to mind for anybody, but I've watched over the years churches, send out messages on social media and all this stuff. We grew by another 30 people, and I know all 30 of those people came from another church. And why would we brag about that? That's not a feather in our hat. We can, or when we have an event and for some reason we need to feel the need to show a picture of the parking lot to show people how many cars are sitting in it. Not that it has anything to do with the ministry or what we did or what God's doing, just to try to brag that there was more people in our parking lot than yours. We can get that way with stuff too. And I've said, a thought that goes through my head all the time. We're not called here to stay, but to go. Sometimes God moves people for very good reasons to other churches locally, outside of our cities, to other states or countries or wherever. That's a reason to celebrate that God's moving somebody right where he wants them to be. Even if it's not here, we should celebrate. I mean, that's a big step. It's hard to do. I've seen the opposite happen far too often, where somebody knows they're supposed to go and people beg them to stay, or they talk themselves out of going because it's uncomfortable, it's unknown, all those types of things. And then we get in a rut, and so does the church, because many times when God's moving you, it's because he's been raising somebody else up, to fit the role that you were in. And so it doesn't just hold you back. Sometimes you hold other people back, and, it can be all kinds of things. So even churches can be greedy. I heard one of my favorite administrative quotes, church administration quotes I've ever heard. I don't have many favorite church administration quotes. This is probably my favorite, from one of my former professors that said, budgets are theological documents. Where you spend your money says a lot about what you really believe. If you spend all of your money on facilities and you don't help anybody, you can't really say your number one priority is helping people. It doesn't mean it's bad things. I like pretty stuff too, but it's that whole where your money is, where your hope, it shows where your heart's at. And that has stuck with me ever since, that when you make budgets, look at where we're investing and where we're striving towards, and it does say something about us, whether we like it or not. But I really like that quote. So here's some other scriptures, and we can stop and talk for a minute. So 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. For the world only offers a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. It's a great couple of scriptures. You know, it's one of those, and I love that it doesn't say the world offers you peace in cravings, you know, in physical things. The world doesn't give peace and happiness. Never met anybody that was just amazingly blessed by the world and didn't have God in their life that were just super happy. I'm not saying there's not anybody in the world that, you know, but in general, those things just don't make you happy. We feel like they would. They're helps. I wish I didn't have to worry about money anymore. That's, you know, to quote Forrest Gump, you know, one less thing. Yeah, it is one less thing. It's a good thing that you wouldn't have to worry about that, but life's got plenty of worries. And y'all all know somebody that whatever they're harping on today, if God's come down and just fixed it, well, they'd just be harping on the next thing in their list. You know, it wouldn't make them happy. It would just take away that particular gripe, and they just gripe about something else. You know, that is the way the world tends to work. It says the world gives us cravings for physical pleasure and everything that we see, you know, and pride in what we do. You know, God didn't do this, I did this. You know, we didn't do this, I did this. You know, we need to be real careful about how important we think we are. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for you'll hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. So I'll note on that one, you can try to ride the fence in a way, but I think the point is at any given moment, you're serving one or the other. So when I make a decision for me, my family, you know, whatever I'm doing, it's either serving God's purpose for my life or it's serving my own or my desire for more. It's never going to be both, where that I make a decision that is my favorite worldly decision and also God's favorite desire for my life. You know, maybe those crosses, you know, those streams can cross every once in a blue moon. Very rare, if ever, though. The idea is that if we live the way God wants us to live, we're not going to be hoarding things up. We're not going to be selfish and greedy, and we're not going to be longing for more here. We're going to have the right perspective that it doesn't matter if I have anything here. You know, when we really understand and believe the Lord of all creation's on my side and with me 24/7, why do I care, or why would I fret overly about things in this life when God's here? If I absolutely have to have something and I'm living right and I'm doing my best, God can give it to me whenever He wants. You know, it's that whole attitude and that whole mindset. Colossians chapter 3 words it this way. It says, so put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. And the thing about that is this does not say, let God put those things to death. It says for us to do it. Now, I know we can't cleanse ourselves from sin and we can't transform our life, but the idea to get rid of those things from our life and stay away from them and seek the things of God is 100% our job. We have to make those efforts. And if we make those efforts, God makes a way for us, and He'll help us fill in the blanks along the way and all those types of things. But we can't come to church, pray a prayer, sing a song, whatever it might be, sit through, endure a sermon, or whatever it might be, and expect that God is going to just make life perfect and easy and you're never going to be tempted by anything. That is not how it works. Paul tells the people, the Colossians, put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. It really is putting why do people feel the need to hoard up money? Because the truth of the matter is, even a large percentage of people inside the church put more faith in money than they do God. It feels more secure to them. You can touch it. I can see my balance when I log into the bank online. I know how much things cost. Everything's great. But that's a fool's errand, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or anything else. And, you know, it's, according to Paul, it's really just about idolatry. that we get to the point where we worship things other than God, the thing that gets our devotion, what has the priority. And by and large, many times it's simply not God. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 10 says, those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. And I know we've already mentioned it here, but it really, really doesn't. And I'll mention one more before we pause. This is from Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. Don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. So why should we not, love money? We should love God and understand that when we have God, we've got anything that we need. We've got anything we could ever want. If we desperately need it, if something needs to happen, God can make it happen. He expects us to do our part, but we've got God by our side. We don't really have anything to worry about, but we still have that flesh wants to come in. That last line's a big deal. We have heaven to look forward to and Jesus by our side 24/7. We should be able to be happy with what we have no matter what life throws at us because He's here. And if we understand what God can do and how much He loves us and where we're headed and everything else, it makes it easier for us to understand why we should have peace and why we shouldn't, rest all, put all of our trust in worldly things. The scripture in the Old Testament, some people trust in horses and chariots. We trust in the Lord. Give them all the militaries, give them all the money, give them all the numbers, give them all the resources. Still, those who are with us are more than those who are against us. It doesn't feel that way, and it doesn't just look that way when you glance across the way, but it's very, very true. God is still bigger and better than any of those things. Anybody have any thoughts? I know that was quite a few scriptures. I just wanted to kind of drive home those points. Yeah, Sabrina, she raised her hand. Way to go. I told you it was about greed. Come on. Or anybody have a question or an example or something that comes to mind? Hmm. Yeah. Oh, it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. That's crazy, isn't it? Right. Wow. That's sad, ain't it? Yeah, absolutely. And, I was trying to think, putting this together, when you think of the richest people, I don't know about you guys, but when I see the dollar amounts some people are worth, first thing comes to my head is I'd never work another day in my life. I mean, forget that. About any place I've ever worked, and they're like, is that okay? I'm like, look, you pay me to do what you need done. I wouldn't be, the paycheck stop, I won't be here. So if that's what you need done, then I'll do it. It's like, you don't pay me because I love it. You pay me because that's the job, And, but if somebody just gave me $100 million, Graydon's not clocking into work on Monday. and I'm not doing a normal job again. I mean, I would want to do things and help people, and, I would love to be able to do more ministry through the week and stuff. It would, there's a lot of freedom, and it's not that I would do nothing, but I wouldn't be working for a paycheck anymore because I have more money than I know what to do with at that point. But there are people with many times more than $100 million that are working 80-hour weeks still, because it's like it's all relative, and I don't think they see it so much as greed. But when you get in, sometimes I would sit around as a kid and it's like, how does somebody with a $40 million contract get broke? And it's like, well, Graydon, they're not shopping at JCPenney anymore. They're not buying a Chevy either. It's like, and I've seen specials that, like, essentially as soon as somebody gets some huge contract, there are literally people there waiting to greet them, to take them to stores and view cars and to beg them to rent houses and all this stuff that cost a paycheck or a year's pay for any normal person. But it's like as soon as you get into that realm, it all becomes relative again. It's like, they don't buy $50 shoes. Their shoes cost $500, $5,000, and you can spend all the money but it's all relative. You start hanging around people that's got that kind of money, they're going to shop at places that spend that kind of money. They're going to go on vacations that cost insane amounts, and it doesn't feel like you're being, throwing tons of money around because everybody around you is doing it. That's just, it's like normal life. I know it's not normal life to any of us lowly people, but when you're in those groups of people, it just feels normal because everybody around you is doing it. And before long, you've spent millions and millions of dollars in months. And so, I don't think most people see it so much as greed. They'll talk about success. They'll talk about, trying to make a difference. They'll talk about leaving a legacy or a name for themselves and stuff. But no matter what they do and how much they get, they want more. Everybody just always wants more. What does another 500, as crazy as this sounds, what does another $1 billion mean to Jeff Bezos that owns Amazon? His life would change none if he got another $1 billion. Like none. It wouldn't affect him at all. It's like when you get to that scale, things get a lot different. But even when it's not on scale, even if you don't have much, you can be a greedy person who's flat broke. You can be selfish and greedy and hoard things up when you don't really have stuff. When there's somebody that needs more than you or that needs with you, and you would rather hold back extra for tomorrow for yourself instead of help somebody live through the day, that's being greedy and selfish. It takes all shapes and forms. It's not always talking about thousands and millions of dollars. Sometimes it's literally talking about breadcrumbs. What kind of people does God want us to be? He wants us to be cheerful givers. People who want to give to people, who would rather somebody else have than for themselves to have. Who, just like Jesus. When you read the life of Jesus, I mean, what did he ever hoard or hang on to? I can't think of a thing the man ever owned other than the clothes on his back. They don't talk about him having stuff. I mean, he led people. I'm sure he had like basics and stuff. But, it wasn't like he was, I would really like to have that for myself. I think he'd have gave it away. It's that whole, he was constantly doing and giving for others and putting himself in peril, by the way, while doing it. As much as we like to complain sometimes, like, God, I don't really want to do that. That would be embarrassing, or, I'm not very good at that. And he's like, yeah, well, when I healed that person, they wanted to kill me, so cry me a river, Graydon. That's the life he lived day in and day out. And it can take all shapes and forms. Anybody else have any thoughts you want to share? Or any questions or anything? I'm going to read a passage here from Proverbs 28, verses 20 through 22. It says, the trustworthy person will get a rich reward, but a person who wants quick riches will get into trouble. Showing partiality is never good, yet some will do wrong for a mere piece of bread. Greedy people try to get rich quick, but don't realize they're headed for poverty. Again, that's that whole perspective. The rich man and Lazarus, I mean, that's what comes to mind when I read that passage. This is in Proverbs. in that parable was given to us in the New Testament, but they match up really well. It's great to have stuff. You know, as much as we're talking about all this and giving to people, I wish I had the $100 million in the bank. I mean, it'd make my life easier in some ways. I'm not saying don't give it. If you ever have just extra money you don't know what to do with, you're welcome to give it to me. You know, I'll do something with it. You know, we'll put it to good use in one way or another. So I'm not saying that, you know, that's a bad thing to have money. In fact, our next passage we'll read is kind of specifically towards people who do have. And he doesn't say you're going to hell because you've got money. That's not the thing. It's how should you live if you are one of the ones that's blessed with more or an abundance or whatever. But when we read that, you know, the perspective and the understanding that it looks really good to have a lot right now. But it's that whole, it would be better to be broke now and make it to heaven than live a very rich life here and miss heaven for any number of reasons. He's literally saying, you know, what they don't understand is they're ignorant to the fact that they've put their faith and their trust and their hopes and their dreams and everything else in their bank account. And when you die, bank account don't go with you. You know, not only that, your family don't even get near everything you've got in your bank account because they'll tax it again. And, you know, I'll not get on that soapbox, but you know what I mean. Yeah, that's, whew, yeah. That one grinds my gears, Sabrina. She missed my first one, so I had to throw another one in there. They do, I know. But, you know, none of that stuff, you know, when we meet Jesus, the homeless beggar on the corner is going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with the billionaire. And Jesus couldn't care less what was in the bank. He's going to be looking in here. And just like the rich man and Lazarus, if you're right here, you could have stunk to high heaven. You could have been wearing rags. You could have been starving to death. You could have made tons of awful mistakes in your life. But if you got saved and you put your trust in Jesus, he's going to say, well done. On the flip side, you could donate billions to charity and have everything here, but put your trust in yourself and what you've done and what you've earned, and you'll be turned away because none of that stuff saves you. None of it can cover sins. None of it makes you a good person. I'm more impressed with the people who don't give their donations in December. Those of you that know much about taxes know what I'm talking about, because you want to get a big donation to your nonprofit, wait till right before the end of the year because everybody's clamoring to get a tax break. You know, it's just that whole, he's looking in here, where is our heart at? Are we the type of people he called us to be? Are we following him to the best of our ability, or have we put our trust elsewhere? You know, we may feel like things are going good because the numbers look good, because the view looks good, the people around us say we're good and all that stuff, but none of that stuff matters when we're standing face to face with the Savior. And again, not unlike all the stuff he went through and the way that he died and everything, all that, none of our excuses are going to hold any water talking to Jesus. You know, it's that whole, that stinks, but he's went through a lot worse, many times over, you know. And so he's looking for people with the right heart. And really greed, just like all sin, is a problem with the heart. It's not a problem with just a thing that you like to do or you struggle with. The problem's in here. When you really and truly love all the people around you, it's impossible to truly be greedy. If I've got 10,000 and you've got 5 and you're not making it, if I really love you, I give you some of what I've got. That's just what you do. You know, not so you can pay me back, and not a loan, and not a I've got more than I need, you don't have enough. A loving person would share out of that abundance, just like you do with your kids. You know, when you've got little kids, you don't get to eat a full meal ever again because they're stealing everything off your plate, and you don't smack their hand. I hope you don't. You don't stab them with a fork and say, that's my steak. You know, it's your kid. And because you love them, or it could be your wife. My wife likes to not be hungry for anything, but then she eats half my fries. I'm just kidding. She don't eat half of them. A quarter of them. No. But in my wisdom, I usually get an extra order now if she says she's not hungry because I know she's going to want some fries or something, yeah. But you know, when you love people, you would rather them have it than you. I've never met a good mom or dad that wouldn't say that about their kids. You know, you don't want to enable like awful. I understand sometimes you can't just keep giving money or anything because it's going to go to drugs or something. If they've got vices they're struggling with, it's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about in general because that's where your heart is. You love them more than you love yourself. You'd rather them have than for you have. And when we really love each other and those around us, that's the way we are. We just want to help. We want to give. That's what being a cheerful giver is, that, oh, we get excited and happy. I can give somebody a jacket that doesn't have one because, yes, this may be my favorite jacket, but I've got more at home in the closet, and they don't. And that's a good thing. You know, and we should feel good about that. Not saying blast it all over Facebook and take a selfie and say, look what I did. I'm just saying that's a good thing to do. Anybody have any thoughts there before I read this next passage about folks that do have an abundance? Well, I'm going to read this from 1 Timothy chapter 6 again. So we read from 1 Timothy, this is the first time we're reading. We're going to read from 1 Timothy chapter 6 one more time tonight after this. This is 6 verses 17 through 19. It says, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. So this is that opposite of what we read about earlier, where the greedy get rich quick, but they don't realize they're headed to poverty. He's saying the opposite for somebody who has a lot, but who invests it in people's lives, who gives freely, who loves on people, and has the right heart. They're storing up riches in heaven, not because of the amount they're giving. It's because that's where their heart is. That's where their efforts go. They're blessing people. You may not can give $1,000 to somebody, but God sees that $5 every bit as much as he does the thousands if you're giving it from your heart, just like the widow's mite. He sees every, and he even says, you give a cup of cold water in my name, you know, I'm not going to miss it. You know, I'm going to see that you did that. It's going to bless me as much as it blesses, you know, even the least person you've ever done that to. And so he's telling, you know, so being rich isn't the problem. Gaining money, having good employment, any of that stuff's not a sin, not a problem. It's when our heart is turned towards the collection of money and things that it becomes a big problem. Because then it trumps our work for the Lord. It trumps who we are. It steals us away because it has priority. And I understand that everybody has to work and make a living. So I'm not saying, well, if you ever miss church for, that's not what I'm saying. That can happen to anybody. And that's not, but when we start putting our drive to gain more ahead of our life in Christ, or make excuses for not doing what we know we should do in order to make an extra buck or $100 or $1,000,000 for all that matters, then we've gone off the wayside a bit, and we need to be pulled back in, because those things will go away in time. Either the Lord's coming back, or we may not be. Teresa shared a prayer request of a 24-year-old kid having a heart attack and dying. If a 24-year-old kid can have that happen to him, don't buy green bananas, you know what I'm saying? Like, it could happen to any of us at any point in time. We don't know how much time we got left. Gina just got the joke. So That's one of my sayings from way back that not everybody gets, but yeah, that's right. You know, it's like we never know when our last day is going to be. And whatever we've done here that wasn't done, that wasn't kingdom work, is just getting wiped off like a dry erase board. It's just gone. Nothing to show for it. It gives us no benefits in eternity. We're not going to walk in. You know, in my head, and it's kind of a joy of mine, and it probably shouldn't be, so y'all pray for me, is that I see us approaching eternity with people thinking they're going to look up here and the people they thought were down here. I think we're going to walk up looking really similar, you know, to the point where it's like the people who thought they had gotten ahead will realize, you know, they're not going to be wearing their $10,000 suits, walking up to the pearly gates looking nicer than the person next to them. I don't know what we're going to be in. You know, I don't know how any of that's going to work. And before, nobody knows 100%. I'll just say that, you know. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but it's going to be a very level playing field. We're going to be standing before the Lord, and he's not going to ask about any of those things. It's going to be what we've done for people, what we've done for him, our obedience. Did we follow him? Did we ask for forgiveness? You know, are we his people or not? That's all he's going to care about. Nothing else matters. Feels like it matters now because life's hard, but it really doesn't matter like these other things. Anybody have any thoughts? Y'all have been too quiet. Y'all don't know any greedy people, so I understand why it's hard.
I have never met anybody that had quite a bit of money and kept wanting more that appeared to be happy in any way.
Same. If you didn't hear that, she just said she's never known anybody that had a lot of money and stuff and was constantly trying to get more that was happy. And I don't think I have either. You know, I've met people that were rich that were happy and very kind and generous and stuff. I have met people like that. But yeah, the people that are still running the rat race and still grabbing whatever they've got, most of them are pretty miserable. You know, in spite of everything they've got and in spite of how well life on this side of eternity is going for them, you know, it's that feeling that, you know, you can't keep, there's always a bigger bear. You know, you can't keep up with the Joneses. It's like whoever is your peers at whatever level you're at, you feel like you can't get ahead of them. Well, when you get ahead of them, there's a whole new set of peers that's got more than they had, you know, and it just never, ever, ever ends, you know, unless you're Elon Musk at the moment. However, if we really knew how much money a lot of the big oil countries had, they'd probably be trouncing Elon in their net worth and stuff too. I've seen enough, you know, there's always going to be somebody that's got a lot more. And generally, there's always going to be people that have less. But that whole drive, more, you know, kind of like one of those first scriptures from 1 John chapter 2. It's like, you know, the world offers only a craving for everything. It's like that empty, you know, it's like being hungry, but no matter how much you eat, you can't get full. You know, or thirsty, and like no matter how much water you drink, you still just feel parched. And did that go off? No, it's back on. I think my beard got caught in it. But you know, but that's what the world gives, is just that eternal almost craving for more. You've not done enough, you've not made enough, you've not said enough back, you've not done this enough, you know, all that stuff, and people's self-worth gets wrapped up in it. And so they're just never ever happy. You know, no matter what they do. Anybody else have any thoughts?
We have to be careful too about not just thinking of financial greed.
Mm-hmm.
In our home, when Dennis got cancer, and
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was that stripping away of help and prestige and pride. It was very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but looking back now, time is so precious
Yeah.
now. I think that we're both very conscious of how we spend our time, and we spend it differently than we used to.
Yeah.
I mean, very differently. So I don't think we need to ignore that type of grief. You know, sometimes self gets,
Mm-hmm.
your pride and your esteem and things that you take for granted. You have to just also temper that with tithing your time like you tithe your
Mm-hmm.
offerings,
Yeah.
because those are valuable things
Yes, they are.
too, not just finances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you think one of the reasons a lot of people won't do some of the stuff God's asking them to do is because they know they'll lose some social standing. There'll be people that like them now that won't like them then, or that'll make fun of them or make comments, or or if they go help that person's the enemy of your, one of your other friends, and they're going to be mad at you for talking to them or whatever. You can hoard up anything. You can hoard up relationships, and you can social notoriety or prestige, or you can hoard up money, or you can hoard up stuff, or you can hoard up food, there's really not, the definition that I looked up says excessive or rapacious desire, especially for wealth or possessions, but it's just really this excessive desire for anything, whatever it might be. It's that whole like, if we only had that kind of desire for God, what could the church do? I don't think we can dream big enough. I've never seen a church with that problem, like universally as a church, because we all struggle with various things that we're not all Scrooge counting money, but there's plenty of people, I used to call Silas Scrooge because when he was little, he loved having his little tin of money, and he would go in there regular, and he'd come out, Dad, guess how much money I got? And he'd never spend a dime. Like back then, he wouldn't spend anything. He's more than happy to spend money these days. But back then, he wouldn't spend his money on it. Now, Ella back then, money burned a hole in her pocket. She just, oh, here, Dad, you can have it, or let's go buy candy, or let's go do this. She couldn't stay in money. He just hoarded it. He'd do without just so he could keep money. He bought like one video game a year with it, like when it come out, but the rest of the time he just counted it. Thought it was so cool he had money, But we can hoard up anything, We can have extra of anything. God can bless us. It really is that. Why does God? There are times when we have extra, and I think we tend to think to whom much is given, much is required. A lot of times becomes about spiritual gifts and stuff, and it's true, but it's also about what we have in this life too. If God has given you more than you need, it's a responsibility to how you invest that extra, because we should be helping people. And because at some point, and you can be on top of the world today, and the light switch can flip, and you can be in poverty tomorrow, and the hope is that another godly brother or sister will then be on the other side of that. I've told a bunch of people over time, you help them with something, it's like, oh, I'll pay that back. And I was like, don't. There's been countless people that have helped me when I didn't have. This was an opportunity when I had extra. So when the tables are turned and you've got extra, please just help somebody that needs it, because right now I don't need it, And so I think that's the way that we're supposed to operate, inside the church. What are the fruits of the Spirit, going from what we studied with the spiritual gifts and stuff: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those that know the song. Please don't. No, I don't mind. It is funny. I was videoing the kids sing that one time, and you could always hear me on self-control, because I was holding the camera. Yeah. Doesn't help I've got a lower register and the kids are kind of, and I'm right next to the microphone. I didn't know it. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to sing along, But, they've gotten a good kick out of that. But if you are living a life that regularly display, you could almost just stop at love. If you've got a life full of love for people, not just those close to you, but people, it's really tough to be really greedy. But if you've got a life full of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, you're not greedy if you're showing all those regularly. I mean, I don't know how you could be. Maybe there's, slivers of it can always show up in anybody's life, but it's that whole, what should we be focusing on, who should we be versus what we're leaving behind. If that's the type of people we're supposed to be, it's really hard to be that and still be greedy with much of anything. The last scripture that I'll share here, again, is from 1 Timothy chapter 6, and it's 6 through 10. Says, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. I love just that quote as it is. True godliness with contentment. So you're living a holiness life and you're happy with whatever it is that you have, whether it's a lot, whether it's a little. Paul talked about that. It's one of my favorite scriptures to say, one of my top misused scriptures, I guess I should say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yes, we can. But I had a preacher one time say, context ruins a lot of good preaching. And it does. It really does. Because you can preach whatever you want if you can just pluck verses out and let them just stand on their own. But in context to Philippians chapter 4, Paul wasn't saying, I'm the biggest, the baddest, the strongest, and I can just plow over everybody because God's with me, I can do everything. Not at all what he was saying. He said, I'm just going to mention this and we'll move on to that. He says, how I praise the Lord that you are concerned about me again, because the church was in Philippi. I know you've always been concerned for me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need. Now he's saying, understand that when he says what comes next. For I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. So he's not saying he wasn't ever needy, but he was saying kind of what we've talked about. I wasn't really in need because God was with me. And if I needed food and God needed me for a task, God can find a way to get me food. If I need money, God can find a way to get me money, whatever it is. He says in verse 12, I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. He says all that, and then he says, for I can do everything through Christ who strengthens me. So yes, we can do everything through Christ who strengthens, but Paul was saying, you understand, I've found the secret to this whole gospel thing. It's that I can be happy when I'm broke and on my deathbed because I know heaven's around the corner and I know God's with me right now and he can provide whatever I need. And if there's a reason I'm here, God understands, and there's something I can do here for him. And that's why I'm here. We're living for a minute here. We're a mist and a vapor, and we're gone. Why would I be in true need when the creator of the universe is right here in the room with me? I'm really not. I might need some things, but I've got somebody who can provide it for me if I can't provide for myself or nobody else comes along. So that verse is just one of those, hey, I can be content in anything because God is with me. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's really important to our view of life as it is as a Christian, because that is the good news. The good news is you once were like this and now you're like that, and I will never, ever, ever leave you. And heaven's just around the corner. So don't worry. I've already overcome the world. Whatever may come, I can take care of it. You just follow me. He goes on in verse 7, after all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. You come into this world, you're just a little baby that can't do anything but whine and eat, and that's all that you've got. And when we leave, nothing's going with us. None of our clubs, none of our activities, none of our accomplishments, none of our money, none of the people that say good or bad things about us. It's all wiped away, and it's just our life that we led. That's what we're going to be approaching God with. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. You know, if you got a roof over your head, you got clothes on your back, and you're fed enough to survive, that's a lot to be happy for. The majority of the world can't say that any day of the year. And that still is mind-boggling where we live in general, that the majority of the world goes to sleep hungry every night, but it does. Majority of the world makes pennies compared to what minimum wage is here. We've got enough to be happy if we've got the Lord. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. Understand, in a lot of ways, as much as I would like to have more stuff, a smaller percentage of people that I personally know that have a lot of stuff are happy and content than the people that don't. I'm not saying you can't write me a check, but I'm saying it don't make us happy. And in many ways, it opens the door for temptations that couldn't be there otherwise. You know, put yourself in situations and around people and in certain company and all those types of things. It can be more money, more problems. In a lot of ways, we can set ourselves up for a mess. Even though some things in our life get easier, it does open the door for a lot more temptations that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And to close, he says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered far from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows." And that's terribly sad, you know. As much as we can be jealous at times of those that have a lot, and I'm not going to sit up here and say I'm never jealous or envious of somebody that's got it made in the shade and all that kind of stuff. I like nice stuff too. I'd love to have a brand new truck, and I'd love to be able to have a bonus room with a pool table, and I'd love to have a big, long, nice vacation just around the corner. All these, those are nice things. But we also understand that those who have excess, many times it's because they've dedicated their life to trying to get the excess, and other times just having it has opened the doors to such temptation that they have fallen prey to it. And so sometimes the grass is far from greener on the other side. Sometimes we may think we want something, but you better be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. It's what I was always told when I was a kid, and it's true. Some things sound great on the surface, and then you're there, and it's really not that great. There are parts of it that I'm sure are nice. But what's most important here in this life is being, I almost don't even like saying Christian, because that's such a blanket word that almost doesn't mean anything anymore, because there are plenty of people that call themselves Christian that just frankly aren't by any real definition of the word. And so I'll say Christ-like. That's what really matters. Are we living Christ-like and following his example and being obedient to what he directs us to do? That's what matters. And if we are, we really don't have anything to worry about. But if we're not, no matter how much other stuff we've got problems. Rachel, do you have something? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Exactly right. Yeah. And I do think that's pretty spot on that, you can't be humble and greedy, really. Those two things don't really go together very well. So, yeah, it is kind of the countersuit to not being humble in a lot of ways. Absolutely. One of my favorite country music singers when I was a kid was Aaron Tippin. And I liked his music, but the reason that I started liking him more is I got to meet him. And I swear you wouldn't know the man had a dime. He spent time and talked to me. He had on just like a raggedy had a cut off shirt with holes in it and a beat up pickup truck. And he was just a normal person. And I'll say I've met other famous people that were not that way. You know what I mean? And so, I really took a liking to Aaron Tippin, even more so just because he was nice and humble, and you wouldn't know he had a bunch of money or anything. And I've watched him help tons of people and stuff and just be a nice guy. And I do think it's a testament to what excess wealth can do. You can't say that about too many big name people. You just can't. And I don't think anybody just wakes up one morning and says, you know what, I think I'm going to be a jerk and have a lot of money. I don't think anybody plans that out. But when you have a ton, it can change you, especially when you start looking at yourself kind of through that wealth, through the lens of that wealth, that I'm not just grading. I'm grading the millionaire. I'm not. But if I were, people start classifying themselves. That's part of who that I am. It's hard not to start getting that feeling that you're up here and other people are down there, and then you start acting different and treating people different. And I've met other famous folks on the lake in Smithville, and let me tell you, they didn't act like Aaron. They were a lot different. And I was like, ugh, and then I started not liking their music as much, and all those types of things. But God's given us good guardrails to be able to find our way through life. And when it comes to greed, he tells us, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. God's not going to ask how much acreage you got and how many square feet your house was or how much money was in the bank or what. He's going to ask very simple things. Did you care for people? Did you help those that were in need? Were you there for me when I needed a drink, clothes, needed visiting, whatever it might have been? Did you go talk to that person, Graydon? I told you 3,000 times to go talk to. Were you willing to get up in front of people and say this is wrong and take up for somebody, even though that means you're not going to be one of the popular ones? He's going to be concerned about things like that, Anybody else have any other comments before we wrap up?
Have known some people that had money, didn't have any, you neither had money,
Mhm.
but they acted like they didn't have a dime, and
Yeah.
they worried themselves to death over spending for this or that. And instead of that bill or whatever, they were worried about having to spend the money.
Yep.
I think that's almost a sin,
Yeah.
worry like that over, because you had the money, you just didn't want to spend it.
Just didn't want to spend it.
Hang on to it.
Yeah. I've known
People out there that
folks like that.
have the money to spend and are, just scraping by trying to pay their bills, and then something's upside down.
Yeah. More often than not, when I've needed help, it's been somebody that shouldn't have been the one helping me that helped me. I know some of y'all have experienced that too. When money's tight, something's gone wrong, you forgot your wallet or whatever it might have been, and somebody comes up and pays, and I've told them, I was like, no, you're not, because I know they can't afford to do that. And I've had more than one of them grab me and, don't you rob me of my blessing. This is what I felt like I'm supposed to do. And like, what are you supposed to do to that? It's like, fine, but you feel terrible about it because they didn't have it, but they gave it just because they cared about you. They loved you, and then there have been times that's happened where there was somebody standing right there that had more money than they knew what to do with, and they just let them give the money anyway. And, and you think, my goodness, yeah. It's like you have tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that you'll never be able to spend in your lifetime, and you couldn't spend the $10 that person just did, so they didn't have to after you heard that whole scene. But no, they didn't, because something about it. What's that? Yeah, it is. Yeah, all sin, that's what it comes down to. We don't have murdering problems as much as we have heart problems. We don't have theft problems like we have heart, because when you really love somebody, you don't do those things. I understand there's mental illnesses where people can do things they don't, but in general, people that have, full capacity of their mind, you don't murder people you love. You don't steal from people you love. All those things. If we really loved each other, if our heart was right, well, that other stuff just takes care. And then it starts making more sense when you hear Jesus say, hey, love God with everything you got and love your neighbor as yourself. Takes care of it all. Because it really does. When we've really got that love, well, that stuff just becomes pretty easy. What are the gray areas? What are the things I can and can't do? Is that what love would do in that instance? Start thinking about others, and, a lot of that stuff just sorts itself out. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts? Well, thank you guys for being here. Oh, Sabrina. No, you raise your hand. You got to share a thought. For those watching online, a week from Sunday, we're going to be having Friends and Family Day, and we'll be heading from church to Greenbrook Park, and we'll have lunch and just a lot of fun, and we'll have food and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll invite everybody to come out. Was that all of it? Now, what was your comment? Such a great idea. All right. Well, let's, Brother John, you mind dismiss us in prayer?